and using a word that has no definition, why don't you just say God just without defining it, right? What is spirit? Well, let's move on here.
Was that a question?
Well, yeah, but you didn't
okay.
Twice you failed to define spirit or even explain what spirit is. So if you can't define it, how can we even discuss whether this thing exists? The second question I have is whether or not you adhere to Popperian falsifiability. I think you agree that in order for a statement to be true, there must be other statements which, if true, would make your original statement false. In other words, what would prove you wrong? What would prove me wrong? If I found a black polar bear, that would falsify the statement that all polar bears are white, right? So will you give me an example of something that would falsify, in principle, your hypothesis of this God that you say you know exists, or in simple terms, what would prove you wrong?
Okay, let me just take a quick step back and look at that falsifiability principle. Now, much of that was propounded by A.J. Ayers, Language, Truth, and Logic. And in his second edition of that, he came forward and said, oh, by the way, the falsifiability principle, it can't be falsified. So there's not a way that you can positively use that all the time. Now, it is good for certain scientific experiments, certain ways that you want to interact with nature. Do you need a falsifiability statement for certain things? Absolutely, but it's certainly not something that is always there that you have to. Now, let me answer your question though. If Jesus Christ did not come to this earth, if he did not walk the streets of Palestine, if he did not die on a cross, if he was not buried in a tomb, and he did not rise on the third day, then everything that I'm believing means absolutely nothing.
But there might be another God.
No, because Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
But he might have been wrong. There might be another God. He might have been wrong. If he didn't exist or if he didn't tell the truth, there might be another God besides the God you believe in. By the way, Jesus Christ did not walk this earth. He did not rise from the dead. He's a complete fabrication. And in my book, I demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Jesus you believe in is not historical. He's a legend and he's a myth. Finally, let me ask you this. Do you think Eve was perfect?
I think my wife is perfect. After God created everything, he said, behold, it is very good. There were no flaws in the creation of Eve.
So why did she sin?
That would be like saying, did Chrysler create a car that could be driven and a person get behind the wheel and drive it off a cliff? What was wrong with the car? Well, nothing would be wrong with the car. God endowed Eve with the ability to choose between right and wrong. Now that capacity is perfect.
But why did she choose wrong? Why did she blow it? If she was perfect, why did she blow it?
She had the perfect capacity to choose right and wrong. Now that would be like saying...
But why did she choose wrong? Why? What was in her that made her choose wrong instead of right? Where did that come from? That flaw of perdition.
And this is with all due respect, but I would say, what is in you that would make you choose the wrong idea and adhere to atheism?
Well, then if God created me, then God created imperfection, didn't he? Don't you see the trap you're in? If God created Eve, who committed a sin, that impulse to sin came from somewhere. She didn't create it herself. It was in her. If I have made a wrong choice, that nature within me was created by this perfect being who created imperfection. He's a married bachelor. A perfect being created imperfection. He does not exist.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Budd, you have 5 minutes to cross-examine Mr. Barker.
Great, thank you. Most of these are very simple questions, and just short answers I think will do for most of these. In your debate with Peter Payne, you said, and you made the statement, and I've got the quote here, all actions are situational. There is not an action that is right or wrong. I can think of an exception in any case. Do you believe that?
Yeah, but the probability of some of those exceptions actually happening are so small that we can rule them out. But
absolutely.
we could think of it, yes.
Great, okay. So in that, you said a person came up to the mic and they said, when would rape be acceptable? And you said that exact statement. You said, well, most of them you can almost rule them out. But hypothetically, if a bunch of aliens came down and said, we're going to destroy all of humanity if you don't rape a girl, would you do that? And you said in that debate, yes, it would be morally acceptable to rape that girl to save all of humanity. Do you still believe that?
It would be horrible. It would be regrettable. I would hate myself. I would probably kill myself after doing it. But I would have the courage, if that was the only option, if that were the only option, then I would go through with it. I would pity that woman. I would pity myself. But morality would require me to take the course of action that results in the least amount of harm. And those of you whose lives that I saved by doing that, you might be disgusted at what I did, but you would be alive rather than dead. So in that weird situation, which is hypothetical and extreme and would never happen, there are cases where what we think are right and wrong could be flipped around.
Now, let me ask you this next question. Could you rape 2 girls to save all of humankind?
Well, we're getting into computational, right? Yeah.
2,000.
I don't know if I'm up to it. I don't know if you...
I'm sorry, we're not. And if you did notice, that's pretty appalling to make a joke about something that's the most brutal crime that humanity can think of. So, continue. It's 2 million. There are 6 billion people. Would it be permissible to rape 2 million girls?
To save 6 billion? Yes. Yes, it would be. Because otherwise you've got 6 billion deaths. Are you telling me we should not do what is morally necessary to do to minimize harm? You can't get through life without some harm.
Okay, let me go to the next question if you don't mind.
Well, I didn't finish answering it, actually.
I'm sorry.
I think we all agreed that it is wrong to stick a needle into a baby. That's horrible. But if that baby needs a life-saving injection, we will cause that harm. We will do that. The baby won't understand it, but we will do that because there's a greater good. So humanistic morality understands that within situations there is harm and there's a trade-off of values, and sometimes we don't live our lives in an emergency mode, but there might be an emergency situation where we might have to do something horrible and regrettable that's against our nature.
Okay, appreciate that. Now, you just said that it might be okay to cause some harm, and your definition of moral in the ranking debate in most of your writing, any person can be called ethical or moral who intends to act in ways that minimize harm. Now, let me ask you a question. One doctor in Nazi Germany was asked how he could reconcile the death of so many Jews with his Hippocratic oath. And here's what he said. He said, when you find a diseased appendix, you remove it. Referring to the killing of the Jews as being a diseased appendix, him helping the body of humanity. He was intending to minimize harm. In his mind, was he moral?
No, because the rest of us can see. Fortunately, there are enough of us in humanity who love our species enough. We make laws to protect ourselves from brutal people like that. And you judge a person's morality by their intended action. So he was wrong to do that because, if he wanted to think he was right, he could. But the rest of us know better.
Okay, so let's say a person, after raping 2 million girls, you came to them and you said, how could you rape 2 million girls? And you said, well, I was doing it to save humanity. Exactly what the Nazi doctor said he was doing. And you just said he would not be moral. Well, let me go on.
But I bet you would thank me if I saved your life.
Not at the expense of doing something wrong, because I know that after this life, I've got somewhere much better to go.
Well, no, you don't know that, Kyle. You don't know that.
I do.
Let's give both of our speakers a hand.
Very good.
Well, I guess I'll ask Mr. Butt this. I've been debating over several different questions. And so I'm a biologist, and I'll start by asking, well, I guess I'll only ask, but for design, which, by the way, is a very tired and run-of-the-mill argument. The overwhelming question for design is, why is it so bad?